show our humanity with respect to intentionally, firstly, saving lives, but also seeking out the missing and paying respects that are owed to the dead and the missing. So it also calls us to protect their bereaved family members. So essentially here, you know, we're here to deliberate what's happening around the coordinated space of saving lives. You know, how about coordinated action around not just counting, but also accounting for missing persons in terms of search, collection, and as well as the collective action that's taking place in providing support to bereaved families. How can we reduce this already very painful and traumatic experience for families that are left behind? And how can we attempt to do this if we don't have a record of the names of those who are missing? How do we attempt to even try this if we do not have, you know, a record of those who are missing and those who are dead? And then we will hear a little bit more from we'll hear a lot from the speakers in terms of not just counting the numbers, but I think really looking a little bit beyond that. And a lot of our speakers have firsthand experience from different parts of the world. We will talk a little bit about the families as well, you know, who they are. We want to understand who they are, you know, how can they have closure when we haven't really traced their beloved ones and informed them? So what are the different initiatives that are out there in setting this this cause that we have in the Global Compact for migration, you know, giving it a reality. So, you know, acknowledging that families need answers for them to have this type of closure. And maybe just to also say that the Global Compact for migration, in a way, you know, it's always, we always talk about it as, you know, depicting, you know, it depicts a positive picture. But I think a lot of us who have worked around the space, we know that the picture can be positive and negative. And today, I think we touch, you know, we touch a reality that has got a lot of negative consequences to people taking their journeys to improve their livelihoods, or who are just, you know, running for shelter and protection. And therefore, you know, it's going to be quite an emotionally disturbing and traumatic experience for many migrants in this aspect. And therefore, even the subject that we will touch, I think, brings us back to, you know, to humanity. And I think we have a very good panel with us here. We have 5 panelists that are coming from different parts of the world and covering civil society organizations as well as international organizations with a lot of experience, I think, on the front line of this issue in their personal capacities for some of them, and also in their areas of work. And like I said, we have 2 hours to engage, to share, to throw questions. There is a chat box. If you just look down on your screens, you will have a chat box. Please use the chat box, fill it up, ask away, because this is the intention of these webinars, that it is much engaging. And so a lot of the questions that we will throw back at the panelists are meant to be thought-provoking, are meant to incite a different way of thinking. And because we also have a bit of a classroom situation, they're also meant to just, you know, invoke a very different way of some of us who have been working around the migration space, think about saving lives and how we think about missing persons. So each of the panelists is sharing their reflections, like I said, and participants, please use that chat box. We also have in the room some eminent speakers that would represent, you know, the academic world or the migration space at large, that will come and give their reflections at some point. And we're therefore looking forward to that, even as they engage and also maybe question a bit our panelists. We have 5 speakers, as I mentioned, and I think just to try, I wouldn't do justice if I mentioned just their names, so we will go one at a time in that order. We will start with Dr. Elisa Ortega Valasque. Please correct me, Elisa, if I've pronounced your last name well. And then we'll move on to Eduardo Canales. And after that, we will have Philippe Fury give us his insights. And then Rafik Ravutha. And last but not the least, Julia Black from IOM will also give us her reflections and intervention. And so without much further ado, let me introduce our first speaker. Hoping that all our speakers would have joined us. I will just make a check in a bit. And our first speaker is Dr. Elisa Ortega Valasque. who is a tenured professor at the Institute of Legal Research of the National Autonomous University of Mexico, UNAM. She holds a PhD in law, and she has a Master of Laws from the University Carlos III of Madrid. I was going to attempt to say that in Spanish, but I think all my basic Spanish escapes me. But her research focuses on asylum and forced migration of children in Central and North America. So we'll hear a lot about that perspective. Dr. Elisa, would you mind to just take us through and give us sort of a critical view, in your opinion, of some of the gaps and the challenges that you see in achieving international cooperation for us to realize this global objective number 8 of the Global Compact of Migration? Over to you, Dr. Elisa.
Okay, hello everyone. Thank you, Paddy. First of all, I would like to say that Objective 8 contains 3 main elements: saving lives of migrants and preventing their death and injury, the identification of the missing and the dead, and the provision and assistance to their families. Thus, through this objective, states have formally recognized that in embarking upon migration journeys, people's lives are put in jeopardy every day, and many go missing or die as a consequence. However, the responsibilities of states in this regard are not new. Rather, they have long existed and can be found within established international law. For example, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights states in Article 3 that everyone has the right to life, liberty, and security of person. Also, in Article 14, the Declaration acknowledges the right to seek and enjoy asylum from persecution, which is further developed in the 1951 Convention relating to the status of refugees. Also, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights recognizes in Article 6 the right to life and the duty to investigate. And also, the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea establishes in Article 98 the duty to search and rescue. But migrants and asylum seekers do not die by accident. Evidence suggests that multiple failures of states to respect and protect the right to life, such as unlawful killings, the excessive use of force, and deterrent policies and practices, have had as a result the increment in the risk of death. National responses to migrant deaths have mainly been determined by tighter border control policies and anti-smuggling strategies, but little attention has been paid to the respect owed to the dead and the missing and protection of their bereaved family members, so as to ensure that already traumatic experiences are not made worse. The names of most of the dead and missing are not known. Their families have not been traced, and where bodies have been found, they are often piled in makeshift morgues or buried in unmarked graves. Families have no answers to what happened. They don't know if a missing relative is alive or dead. Thus, unnecessary pain and suffering of migrants and their families are regularly a result of inadequate or even antagonistic state practices. For example, Italian government refusal to allow rescue migrants to disembark. US legal sanctions for activists who provide water to regular migrants crossing the desert near Arizona in the US-Mexico border. Mexican government's failure to investigate and provide justice to the families of the 72 migrants killed by the organized crime 10 years ago in San Fernando, Tamaulipas, Mexico. And in general, the prosecution of civil society humanitarian actors for provision of food, water, shelter. So Objective 8 recognizes that it's not solely the criminalization of the humanitarian assistance that undermines the rights of migrants, but the deliberate and disproportionate use of civil law and legal obstacles to render humanitarian assistance unlawful for non-compliance must also be prevented and addressed in a much more cooperative way, both at national and international level. Unfortunately, international cooperation has proven to be unsuccessful in these terms, but fruitful when it comes to divert asylum seekers from poor countries through safe third country agreements. For example, in 2019, the US signed 4 agreements of this type with Mexico and 3 Central American countries, Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras, 4 countries which cannot be considered safe for asylum seekers, and furthermore, these countries produce forced migrant and asylum seekers. Death and distress do not distinguish between those embarking by choice on migration journeys and those who are forced by persecution, conflict, violence, or other circumstances, but both frequently occur as a consequence of forced irregular migration in the absence of lawful modes of migration and very restrictive asylum systems and more in COVID times. Artificial distinctions and barriers based on the immigration status of missing, deceased, and buried persons must not be erected when addressing the legal and practical issues of search and rescue. The treatment of missing persons, the management of bodies, and all the duties owed to the deceased and their families. International norms do not directly address the rights of those who died or go missing at international borders and of their families. There is an assumption that human rights end with death. Where legal rules addressing the treatment of the dead or the missing exist, they do not directly apply to a particular context of irregular migration and border death. Also, there is no provision calling on states to enable the movement of buried family members across borders to participate in identification, participation at inquest, and other coronial procedures, legal proceedings, burial, and paying respect. There is no provision for the states to establish annual budgets and funding for welfare, psychological and advocacy support for buried families, with a special provision for children, and nothing exhorting states to make legal aid available for their participation in proceedings related to the death or disappearance of their relatives. So there's a lot of international action to do, and I would like to finish with this.
Thank you, Dr. Elisa, for that. I would just come back to you later, maybe after our second speaker has spoken. You do mention there the importance of family involvement in terms of identification of bodies, and I just wanted to find out if there was any examples that we have from the regions that you cover that has shown, that has shown maybe even at a local government level, if you like, administrative passes or administrative means that allow families to participate in the identification of the deceased. So I think I would come back to you on that in terms of understanding that, and also maybe to get a sense from you what would be sort of the reasons that are being attributed to this lack for countries that don't allow that identification to take place as a means to support the identification process rather. What are the kind of reasons that are given to deter families, and also to understand a bit more about what kind of other practical support that's given to families in this case for them to have closure over their deceased relatives. So I will come back to you, maybe just to give you these reflections as we are, proceeding now to the next speaker, Eduardo Canales. Eduardo, are you with us in the room? Dr. Sada, if you could just help me check if Eduardo Canales is with us in the room.
Yes,
if not, I would. Is he
yes.
here with us? Very good.
Unmute your mic.
Can you hear me?
Eddie, you need to unmute your mic.
My mic is unmuted, but Eduardo's mic, can you hear?
No, Eddie is not unmuting.
Eddie's not unmuting. Maybe somebody from the technical side can assist us to see. It could be that he has to be made co-host.
We are trying, but I am giving him notification, but he's not accepting.
You're getting notification. Okay. So Filippo, are you with us? We could quickly get to Filippo while we deal with the technical issues to get Mr. Canales to join us. So I will go ahead and then introduce Philippe Fury. Filippo, I think you're with us.
Yep, I am.
Super. So Philippe Fury is a PhD candidate in anthropology from the University of Montreal, and his research focuses on migration, local hospitality, and the notion of asylum and a sanctuary city. He's an associated researcher in the MECMI project, which is a project that looks at death in the migration context. And this project is run by UQAM University as well as the Paris Nanterre. And it's a project there that looks at mapping migrants' barriers in the city of Catania. And I think we will hear some insights from this project. I also think that Filippo Fury is a name that's very well known for several years in terms of following the plight of migrants in cities around the world, not just in Italy, for instance. Some gripping stories there where he had done looking at migrants' plights in Europe, but also particularly also looking at Venice. He is a member of the international network called Migrants Europe, and is engaged in the Boats for People Coalition, which works to defend the rights of migrants at sea. And he has been working on these stories and covering these stories and going a bit in depth, starting from 2003, where he started focusing on dead and missing persons to produce information guides, particularly to support families and their supporters. And these guides are available in multiple languages, and I hope we can hear a little bit about this. He is also working, he's also an expert for the... Oh, okay. Eduardo, is that okay if I can have you give us your reflections just after Filippo? So that will be in the next couple of minutes.
Yes. I'm sorry, we got disconnected there, but I'm back. Yes, the South Texas Human Rights Center was was founded in 2013, and one of the main reasons, the principal reasons, is that they're in South Texas, and we're talking about the U.S.-Mexico border. There was no established protocols regarding, identifying or encountering the unidentified migrant bodies in South Texas. So when we started the center in South Texas, we were one of the main issues was that they were not taking DNA before they were burying the individuals, and this was very, very critical protocol, in different counties, because each county has their own in South Texas has their own protocols, and they do not have medical examiners' offices in every county. They depend on a justice of the peace to go out, and basically the justice of the peace just goes out and rules the time of death and says that the person was deceased because of the elements. So in 2013, in Brooks County, which was a county that encountered 113 recovered bodies just in 1 year, in 2013 and 2012. And that presented a major problem, in terms of the bodies being buried without DNA being taken. So it took us a period from March of 2013 to August to change that practice in Brooks County in order for bodies to be sent approximately 2 hours away to a Webb County that had a medical examiner. And that in itself proved to be a major advocacy win for the center in terms of bodies going to a medical examiner, so the DNA can be registered with the proper bodies, the proper laboratory in University of North Texas. So in that regards, we have begun the process there of trying to maintain some protocols in the recovery of bodies. And we have, with the South Texas Human Rights Center, also has one of the major things that we're known for, of course, is the water stations that we are in and around Brooks County. We have close to 175 water stations that are distributed in various ranches and in back roads, to where people, they're accessible to the migrants. Bear in mind, once a migrant gets to the U.S.-Mexico border, that migrant, once he crosses the border, he is turned over to a guide, a coyote, as we refer to them here in South Texas, and they are then escorted to the brush, and where the individuals are trying to circumvent the checkpoint. Checkpoints there's 128 checkpoints all up and down the US-Mexico border, where people have to get through those checkpoints and prove that and say whether they're US citizens or establish their identity when they get to these checkpoints. The checkpoints is a clear manifestation of militarization on the US and Mexico border. And so that is where migrants are trying to circumvent the checkpoint in order to get to the big cities and to where they can unite with families, or they can also get with friends and find the essential work that is done in the United States. So we have, as I mentioned before, in 2013, we established the protocol for them to be able to send the bodies that were recovered in Brooks County and send them to a medical examiner so the DNA can be submitted in the proper laboratories. And then we've also doing the question of trying to save lives with some of the migrants in placing these water stations. We also have a missing migrants hotline in South Texas, where we're receiving calls from, as an NGO, we receive the calls from various people all over South Texas, all over South Central America, the three main countries being El Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala, and then also from Mexico. People call us and try to, it says for us to assist them in trying to locate their missing loved one. Prior to the pandemic, prior to COVID-19, we would do and these are established protocols that we did with the Border Patrol in terms of sending in an inquiry, a digitalized, a computer inquiry, whether somebody had been detained or not detained by Border Patrol. In this respect, it did provide some relief for families, because if we found them that they had been detained and apprehended, then families were assured that they were safe and live for another day. That is protocols that we establish. Category 1, in terms of determining whether somebody was detained, and then category 2 and category 3 were much more intense in trying to rescue and recover bodies. That is, we're probably the only NGO in South Texas that are on the U.S.-Mexico border that entertains, that takes these calls in terms of trying to assist people to investigate where one of their loved ones was left behind, and it is very, very difficult in terms of the families not having very much information regarding once their loved one crosses the border and how they are and when they're left behind, whether it's by the person not knowing the terrain, and the South Texas terrain is very, very, very dense, very, very thick and brush and vegetation, and right now, and very, very hot in terms of the humidity, very intense in terms of people losing and not having enough water to maintain their. It can be a 2-day, or it can be a 3-day effort in terms of walking in as people refer to it, el desierto. It is not really a desert. It is a very thick, as I described the terrain, and trying to circumvent that, and then being picked up on the other side after they have circumvented the checkpoint. And so that's where people are perishing. People are dying in South Texas. You can compare South Texas to the Mediterranean in terms of the number of people that have have perished and have not been recovered. So people will attempt to circumvent the checkpoint. There is one particular method that by Border Patrol that causes people to scatter. If they come upon a group of 10, 15 people, then people are, they run everywhere into the brush, and there is no, there may be an attempt to recover all the bodies, but that's not the case. And that's how people wind up also dying in terms of not coming back to the group or reuniting with a guide in terms of being able to make it through the brush. And we're basically talking in that people are trying to make it through at night and in darkness in terms of trying to get through. So we feel all these calls from people from the U.S., people trying to locate their loved ones. Since March of this past year, the Trump administration has imposed public law number 42, which does it does not even people are not able to present any asylum case. They are quickly taken back to the bridge and escorted back to the bridge after their name, their date of birth and fingerprints are taken, and a very brief background check is done. But within the hour, people are being expelled. And since the pandemic in the United States has taken over, the protocols are, that's the protocol. So that's over like 200,000 people that have been expelled, and nobody, asylum case has been entertained to any degree. Nobody has any possibility of presenting a case to the Border Patrol agents. They're immediately taken back and to the bridge and expelled. So we have just recently an example in terms of our efforts to do identification purposes and repatriation. We have a cemetery mapping project that we are a part of the Forensic Border Coalition, and the Forensic Border Coalition is composed of the Argentine Forensic Anthropological Team, South Texas Human Rights Center, the FACT Center, the Forensic Anthropology Center at Texas State, and the Calibri Center for Human Rights in Tucson, Arizona. The efforts to do identification and repatriation, these protocols have been very, very, I think that since that the center was established in 2013, we have exhumed over 220 bodies have been removed from the cemetery in Brooks County, and of those, and then the other cemeteries that we have been covered where there are unidentified burials. We have also taken that project to exhume for identification purposes bodies and stored those at Texas State University, their Freeman laboratory that does the analysis and the study in terms of determining different aspects of those individuals, and then they're submitted their DNA.
Eduardo, I'll just ask you to just wrap it up in a minute, and then I can ask you some other questions for follow-up.
Yeah, I'm almost very close to finishing. So that effort is undertaken with the Forensic Border Coalition in terms of establishing the protocols that were non-existent in South Texas in terms of identification purposes and trying to establish some repatriation. And we've been successful with about over 30 bodies that have been identified and repatriated. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eduardo Canales. I didn't even manage to give an introduction, but I think that, you know, the explanation of the work that you do at the South Texas Human Rights Center is self-explanatory. And it's not a wonder that, you know, your key objective is to rescue migrants who are in danger. And I think you have been able to just demonstrate and show us through the different examples that you've given us, from identification, provision of basic supplies, and as well going a little bit further for migrants that are in danger in the area of South Texas. I was looking back at some of the work that you have done in 2018, and I saw a very small clip. I think it's a feature of, I mean, what sounds like a small number to what you were doing, but you were explaining, for instance, what was happening in this particular clip is that two bodies of teenagers, because they were 18 and 9 years old, from I think Mexico and El Salvador, who were just found, whose bodies had essentially just frozen to death, found crossing the border. And in my mind, I just thought, and you mentioned something in that clip where you said, you know, for everybody that's recovered, there's about 5 bodies that are missing out there. There's about 5 bodies out there. And so my question would sort of be, what's really happening? And I think you've been able to answer some of these numbers, you know, to give us some of these numbers, even in your intervention. But, you know, what's really happening around that space in terms of this? And do you really see a collaborative effort that's really coming also from these sending countries? And also the number of children, what are the, you know, when we come to break it down a bit to understand who are these migrants that are making these crossings, have you seen with experience over the years if this has moved to include more women and children, for instance, and when we're talking about the youth as well? So maybe just to come back a little bit on that one, I give you a minute.
Okay, I will. Thank you. Well, I mean, again, there's no systemic way to investigate the missing, the people that have perished. We're, you know, one NGO that does that investigation. So you know, for every person, for every body that is recovered, you know, that do go as high as 5 estimates of people that are still out there. And unless an NGO like the South Texas Human Rights Center and students from Texas State University or do a particular organize some and get permission in some of these ranches to do line searches, no other effort is undertaken in terms of public officials to do you know, a process of searching for bodies out there. Everybody that is recovered, every remain that is encountered is incidental to the work that exists out there with some of the ranches doing, you know, during hunting season or doing cattle or in that regard. So it's nothing that is an official process of trying to retrieve these bodies that have perished out there in South Texas. And it is very, very, you know, when we organize a search in some of these ranches and we get permission to do that, it is very, very, you know, hard to really do the searches in this terrain to try to find skeletal remains. Last year, in the last 2 years, there were 50 and 51 recovered remains and bodies. And usually it winds up being half bodies and full bodies that are of migrants that perished very recent. And then the rest, the other half is skeletal remains of people. So this year we have I think 30 is the number of recovered bodies and skeletal remains in Brooks County. And I'm only talking about one county, which is 75 miles from the border. And that is where it has a major checkpoint that people try to circumvent. And they go through private properties and private ranches. And that is different. That is what is very different from Arizona in terms of Arizona. That border being public Bureau of Land Management, public lands, but it's still It's difficult because that's a very, very mountainous and very rough terrain. And then this area over here is very, very thick vegetation, and it's as difficult for people to get lost and perish.
Thank you, Eduardo, for those insights. And I think it's also, interesting to hear of the differences that, migrants would face. And then I guess also the challenges that come with trying to save lives in these different types of terrain, because that goes not just for the migrants, but also for the ones that are trying to do rescue, and in terms of also recovering bodies. So the kind of challenges that you go through. If I just give a very short, for those who didn't know, Eduardo Canales is the executive director and founder of the South Texas Human Rights Center, which is based in Texas. And among many other things, he's, organized a lot of movements, but also been a community and labor activist since the 70s. And he's also currently the board chair of the National Network for Immigrant and Refugee Rights. And he, like I say, co-founded the South Texas Human Rights Center. So we're very privileged that he could share his insights with us. I will come back to you, Eduardo, in a bit. Maybe let me just go to our next presenter, and that will be Philippe Fury. And maybe also quickly before I bring in Filippo, just to say for all our panelists, as you speak, if you have any resource materials, please do feel free to post them in the chat box, any reports that have been produced to explain the kind of work that you do in the area of international cooperation, but also in general to find out the different activities that your organizations are engaged in relation to GCM Objective 8 on saving lives, and an international cooperation for on missing persons. I think Filippo Fury, I started a bit of the intro, and Filippo, I don't think we can do justice to an intro here. And so maybe I would just ask that, as you talk to us about Migre Europe, maybe you give me the correct pronunciation for that, and a coalition that you have formed called Boat for People, Boat for People Coalition, where you have done a lot of significant work in the Mediterranean, particularly to prevent migrant deaths, but also to support the migrant family members in locating the missing migrants. And in this way, do you think that you can just identify for us, what are the areas of improvement which you see in terms of the both organizations that you're involved in and the other things that you're working on in relation to GCM 8, on how we could sort of be a bit more geared to realizing this task at hand? Filippo, if you could just give us your interventions.
Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for the intervention of the previous speakers. And about the first point, let's say, saving lives, I think that the intervention of Elisa, clarify another situation. I think as Migrant more, so we are an organization who work on analyze the European policy concerning migration, control of migration, and externalization of the control of migration. So the scope is almost clear. So as Migrant, so Migrant is a network of organization from the north and the south of Mediterranean and the West Africa. And our work is trying to criticize and analyze the European policy on migration. And it's easy to say for me that saving life, if we are talking about European border regime, is a little bit hard to not say that they are not helping to saving lives, let's say. In order to, so if we analyze the externalization of control in Niger, or let's say in the North Africa, the situation in Libya, who produce many critical situation, let's say, and the situation of in Mediterranean Sea, we can say that the border regime is a subject who produce this kind of dangerous situation and that. And as Migrant, I send you a link about our paper concerning we are working and we are defending the organization operating for solidarity, and we try to support and fight against the criminalization of solidarity. So we try to support the NGOs who are doing a great job when they can do it in Mediterranean. And the problem is that the border regime stopped them, and we create a kind of gray zone in Mediterranean, where it's hard to witness about violation and situation of danger of for the persons. Let's say we have a case a lost boat between Algeria and Sardinia 3 days ago. Is a kind of the last example of this kind of danger situation. But about missing, so it's the second step is concerning more the work that we do with Boat for People. Is a coalition of organization in the north and south of Mediterranean. We start to work, and our purpose, our idea is to after 2011 to defend the rights of migrants at the sea. And after the most important shipwreck in 2013, 2015, we start to try the way to help directly families. So we produce a guide, information guide for families and for association, try to give to the families the information they need to search, not to find, but to search. And we work on the Central Mediterranean in particular. You can find, you change your, sorry. Okay. You can find the guide, the paper guide, and website and online guide on our website, but I put in the chat the link just later. What I try to point with you concerning missing migrants today and what we can do to help families is first about the guide. Was the idea is to give the tools to the family to search better. So we produce this guide, but we discovered that sometimes families don't know nothing about them because they lost the contact with the relatives, and it's very hard for family to find the information concerning the relatives who are missing. So we try to think as let's say Columbus. I'm Italian, so I'm using Columbus. So the idea is try to go on the other way. We discovered that in for example, and this is the Catania project I have with the Make Me project. We try to map the situation of burials of migrants in Catania, and we discovered that during the investigation and during the search and rescue and disembark operation, we lost many information. The information that are collected by the different actors on the disembarkation place are just lost and split in different actors. So we try to collect all the information and produce a kind of local database concerning only the 270 bodies that the municipality of Catania buried in the local cemetery. So this is one of the problems we have, and the other is that during the investigation, the persecutor and let's say police are just focused on the smuggler, let's say, and the situation of to find the smuggler and so on, and they lost completely all the information. They are not searching for the information concerning the missing person on the bodies, on the dead people. And so this is another problem we have, and we need to straighten this capacity to collect information, okay, to collect information and try to organize this kind of information. So what we are trying to do is collaborate, and we are collaborating with Boat for People, with the Missing Person Project of ICRC, trying to one side try to normalize the collection of data in the forensic systems, to try to collect the information and be able to access to all the information that we can have concerning, let's say, bodies. And on the other side, we try to, let's say, protect witness and survivors, because the witness and survivors are the people, they have, I mean, the most information concerning the missing and the dead people, but they are treated like just illegal migrants, no protection. They don't trust in the, let's say, national institution. They are completely cut off this system. There's a kind of black hole. So we try to modify even the concept of family. We feel that this person are in a relation with the missing, and they have many information. They can help to find families and to help family to go to the body and help for the identification, the formal identification. And on the other side, we consider that they need help too, because they are survivors after the shipwrecks and so on. And the third point we try to touch is the connection with diaspora, for the same reason. So it's harder to go search the family in the country of the party, because the migrant and the missing are turned on diaspora to the destination point. So probably it's important to straighten the trust between the locals, diaspora, and the civil society organization, and the actors who can be who collect information, as ICRC, for example, and try to help for identification. And one of the most important point is the logic of firewall, let's say. So try to create a kind of platform or a kind of subject between families and let's say irregular migrants, or who are exposed to criminalization and so on, and the institution who can help and find families. Try to protect the witness and keep information to find families and to help families. So this is the picture of our work in general, and in my particular work on Catania. I will share with you the Boat for People guide and maybe some more information that we can discuss after.
Filippo, thank you for that insight into the project. But I think it's and we can I guess go on and on to ask some different questions. And I think you went on ahead to explain a little bit to us. I wondered how the review has been in terms of the usefulness for families in this guide that was provided. So how different is it going in terms of search, in terms of the numbers that are at least being searched for? But then maybe before I ask that question, there was an interesting question that I have just seen pop up in the screen that talked to identification, and that comes from Dr. Tulika Goa, who talks about how far can saving lives really be a reality if the documentation is not in place, and how information is collected of a missing person, especially when his or her documentation is not available. Or has been forged in this case. And I think this goes also to speak to the identification, the fact that these migrants in the first place may not even have the right identity card or identification document with them. So how far is this a challenge in your work in just addressing this question that Dr. Tulika has asked in the chat box?
It's a very hard question. I mean, the problem of let's say fake identity or not, the haraga, the concept is to burn our papers. Why? To be invisible. So more or less the families and the migrants accept the fact that they will be invisible during the route, because they want to escape to the border regime and border control. So this is something they know. So how to in the future, how we can create a kind of safe connection between families and migrants, try to save the identity, to keep the identity safe, even if they hide their own identity during the travel and in the routes. For the situation we have, the problem is exactly this one. So we identify let's say in Italy we have I don't want to speak about numbers, but just to remember that in Italy the 75% of still missing. So we have 25% of bodies, more or less, and we have the, let's say, correct identification, because it's very difficult of let's say 20% of this 25%. Okay, so the rest 18% is unknown. Okay, the problem is how to find the correct identity if you don't have the connection with families. That's why the idea is try to work with the people that they have information concerning this person. Not probably the right one, not probably the complete one, but start to to compose a kind of puzzle of identity and try to reach the family by this connection. And there is a kind of very interesting project by the ICRC Forensic Office concerning the analysis of data. Try to understand this mass of information we can catch in a different place and try to understand who is the person, and try to find the family. Let's say trying to find the family just to prove that the person is the person, and do the legal and formal identification. So it's very complicated, even in the theoretical way. Is because it's completely different from the logic that, for example, ICRC and the Red Cross movement apply during the war cases. They know, because the family know that the relatives was fighting in the specific place, so we know where the person probably is, and we start to reflect more in the same logic of the we mentioned the antropologia, the Argentina Equipo Argentina de Antropologia Forense. We try to think and apply the method that they have, try to compose the understand the movement. That's why there's this kind of collaboration between the organization working on migration and the ICRC staff, for example, try to find a way to apply the methods and techniques of ICRC to the migration. Is it clear? It's a little bit okay. I don't know if I can.
Thank you, Filippo. I think we will also ask other panelists to sort of, to see if we can ring fence on this one. And I will ask Julia as well to sort of prepare, as this one of the questions that we probably will ask. I like that you have made reference to the ICRC program. And maybe, Filippo, for you later, we just come back to you later as you will give some remarks later. Maybe you could speak to us. We understand that there was some policy recommendations that were made in this space, in the missing migrant space, by ICRC, and I think a lot of reference to that program as well. And I think these recommendations came out in June 2020, and we wanted to just, I think it would be interesting for the audience here to find out, what do these recommendations really speak to. I mean, we do know that the focus is on missing migrants and their families, and very much related to Objective 8. But how collaborative is the space in terms of who ICRC is engaging? We know that you are an expert on that, so we hope that you can give us a bit more in terms of understanding who participates in this, who participated in putting these policy recommendations together, and also some of the specifics in terms of, let's say, reducing the so-called missing on the road migrants that are very evident in different parts that ICRC's program also covers, from, Mediterranean, Central American routes and so on. So maybe you could come back to us later and just speak a little bit more into this one.
Thank you.
And maybe we move on to our fourth speaker, because we can see we're already an hour into our discussion. And I think very intriguing as well. We have touched on some very interesting aspects in terms of the different efforts that are taking place at different levels, from a local level, and also looking at different initiatives that are happening, as Filippo and Elisa have also highlighted. And maybe I just come to you, Rafik Ravutha, as I introduce you, Rafik, just to say that Rafik is the founder and executive director of the Center of CIMS, and he's the director of a TV show called The Migrants World. I will not try to pronounce the original word that one is, but I think he can tell us a bit more. But most importantly, Rafik has been investigating cases of missing migrants as a media person, and also working really as a rights activist for the past 20 years. And through this show, Migrants World, he has managed to rescue and rehabilitate approximately 5,000 missing migrants in the last 20 years. He has a deep understanding about irregular migration channels, and he understands, the different rules and the regulations that are there in major countries of destination, and has well received a lot of support from various volunteers and advocates, as well as rights activists in the space, both in the country destinations and also in the home countries of these migrants, which has obviously been very crucial to the organization. And Rafik, as you come on, listening to the other speakers, maybe you could just join in and give and share with us from your experience in helping these families, to search and also to locate their missing relatives who migrated from different parts of India into various parts of the world. Would you just give us what role civil society organizations have played in your work in terms of realizing Objective 8? And then also coming on to the show that you produce that does this very important work of locating and rescuing those who are trapped and the missing migrants. Could you just discuss a bit how the media can contribute to existing progress in terms of achieving Global Compact Objective 8, and then also touch a bit on the challenges that you have faced as being part of the civil society network in this space. Thank you, Rafik.
Hello, I think you can hear me. My version may be a little bit different from the others, because from the Mexican and European version of missing is during their travel or trying to reach their destination countries, etc., etc. My version is a little bit different. Like people who are trying to migrate during they are missing, maybe during their transit and after migration and a post-migration stage. These three stages, large number of cases actually from this type of migrants. And what I did is I started a TV program. Apart from the other programs, it was just a program for the television channel 20 years before. And we have several cases of in Kerala. I don't know whether you know about my place. It's Kerala. That time, and still we are sending a large number of migration to Middle East and the other part of the world. Actually, our migration started to other parts, Ceylon, Burma, and the other countries. But later, most of our people travel to Middle East after the oil time. So what I did is we have several issues of missing people who are not contacting back home cases. So what we did is we started to take up the version of the families to a TV camera. They will share their issues, like their dear ones who left them are not contacting them, and they are looking for them, and there is no contact for long years. This kind of issues we take before a camera, and this was widely telecasted, broadcasted in all around the world. And our large number of viewers are from Middle East, and the viewers themselves started to find out these missing cases. And uh, and our diaspora organization, we have a very strong diaspora organization in Middle East. They also helped us to find out this missing person. This is the way we started actually this program, and this was very new for everyone, because up to that time people thought about people who are going abroad was having very good life, and they are getting better salary, they don't have any issues. That was the belief until the program started in August 2000. But when we started to take up the case issues of migrant workers who are missing, who are not contacting back home, their families issues, how this family is struggling, this type of issues actually created a basic understanding about there are issues, maybe during the transit, maybe after migration, maybe post migration. And during these 20 years, we through the television we attended around 2,800 cases of missing. And apart from this television show, we are also attended different cases, and it's coming around 5,000. And we don't actually, Paddy said the wrong thing, we don't have that much rescues. We attended around 5,000 cases, but around 50-60% of our enquiries search was success, and but still the 40% is still missing, mostly in Middle East. We have missing cases in even US, Europe, and other parts of the world also. Around 80 cases in Singapore, and 120 cases in Malaysia. We have a large number of cases in other parts of the world, but most largely in Middle East. Through this investigation, through this searching experience, we found that how people are missing. What is the reason for missing? We found that a large number of people are still looking for betterment of their life. They are thinking the Middle East or the other part of the other, some countries are giving very good opportunities for them. They will get more salary. The life is better than their place. So there is a rush for migration. A large number of migrants are people are trying to migrate for betterment of their life. And this is the major issue. We found that a competition is there. People somehow, if the middleman or the travel agent or any other person giving a false information or a false promise, they are believing it. So they will not think about the genuineness of the right, the information is right or wrong. They will jump into that. But in reality, in life, they are ending up in trouble. Sometimes they are in Middle East, most cases they are ending up in desert or isolated places, and in different conditions. So they don't want to communicate back, and they don't have a chance to communicate back. And sometimes the kafala system, you know that most of you, I think you know that the sponsorship system prevailing in Middle East is called kafala. It is entitled with the sponsor or a company. So there is restriction for the migrant, this person. He cannot move freely. He cannot leave his employer. His documents are with the employer. So when he is having issues, at least either he or she has to accept it. Otherwise, if he is responding to if he want to jump out of that situation, he will be end up in trouble. So the employer will put him in absconding stage. And the person is thinking that if he caught by police or the law, he will end up in jail or a maximum different situation. So we don't want to appear before the society. In such condition also, people are absconding, and they are not able to getting back to home. And the other things are the female migrant domestic workers. Female migrant domestic workers are very limited chance of getting communication. Like most of them are not allowed to use mobile phones or any other communications. And the system in Middle East, most of these houses are making walls for them. They cannot go outside. They cannot go freely. Their mobility is restricted. They can move with the employer or the family of the employer, but there is no freedom for movement. And if these domestic workers want to come out of this situation, they don't have any document, because this whole document is with the employer. So they have to limit their movement in some homes. This is also another big issue for this thing. And in some time, people who are end up in arrest or detention or in jail, they will slowly lose their communication. And we know that you all, I don't know whether you know that in Middle East, most of this arrest or detention or people who are ending up judicial system, it is not actually reporting to the origin country's missions. These people who are in detention or in prison, this data is actually not with the origin country mission. So this is also one area of people who are not having any communication with the families. And the other major issue is trafficking, because the middleman or the agents who are bringing these migrant workers are putting them in a situation like sometimes they don't have any documents, and sometimes they are making false documents for these people. So when the worker or the person ending up in the destination country is finding that he is actually in a different world. He don't have any document. He is not the person when he started his journey. So naturally he's ending up in a absconding stage. Maybe you can we found that during these early years, what is the biggest challenges we faced during? Personally, I found that there is no coordination between origin country and destination country on any other matter of the data or the person's life. India, we are sending a large number of migrant workers, but the number still we don't have. And the destination countries, sometimes Saudi Arabia and the other countries, releasing a certain number periodically, but this number is not matching. The excess number which the destination country is showing is actually the sending country's number is not matching. Sending country is saying that this much number only we have, and the destination country is saying that this much number we have. Your Indians, this much we have. So the thing is that there is a mismatch between the data, and there is no coordination between, as I said earlier, people who are end up in detention or prison. There is no sharing data between embassy missions and the destination country. And earlier I said the false identity, people who went through false documents, or people who are trafficked, they will naturally having a false identity. When we are inquiring about this person, we don't have any data on the person we are inquiring. I remember one case. There is a flight crash in northern part of Kerala, and the airline company, after this crash, airline company announced a sum of money for this died persons, and the family received this money, but around 10 persons family was not presented for getting this compensation, because this 10 family means 10 person died was having false documents. There is no family for them. These documents were actually forged. So it's a story from north side of Kerala, and still people are using forged documents to migrate, and their identities maybe it is not in any part of the world. And third issue we faced largely is with geography. Geographical situations, because large number of migrants are ending up in deserts or interiors, and they don't have any communication. Even my program, the television channel or phone or any method of reaching out them. Even our social diaspora organization, they don't have any access to these interior places. But we managed to find out several cases in such occasions also in different time. That is history. And the third and fourth thing is unidentified corpses. Like I remember one case we attended. Around 4 persons were missing in Saudi Arabia, Khobar area, and we were trying to find out them for 4 years, and we were not getting any answer from our side, our diaspora person side, or diaspora leader side, or any information from the viewers also. These 4 years passed, and later this story came out that these all 4 were buried lively, and it was done by 3 Arab persons. Because of this, these 4 died person were preparing some illicit liquor, and it is actually against the law. And these 3 Arabs done it a very cruel manner, that they beaten them and buried lively. So for 4 years there was no trace out of any information on these 4 persons whereabouts. And people tend to remain, that is the saddest thing. People, a large number of people doesn't want to call back or communicate to their families because of their situation is very bad in destination countries. They started from home for a big hope, but they ended up in very different situations. So they don't want to communicate back to home, and they don't want to share their experience with their family. This is the issue of a few a large number of people. They just want to abscond themselves. They want to remain absconded, purposeful hiding. That is the issue. These are the things I just want to share right now. Maybe I can share something more later.
I was going to say, I think you have brought us to another side of the coin, which was very interesting, is to understand the motivations of migrants that could be alive and accounted as missing, in understanding what kind of motivations are there. And I think it was also important to bring in that gender dimension, and the issue that's related to being in a situation of some of them being actually victims of trafficking and enforced labor, and what that also means in terms of communication and them being accounted as missing persons. I also thought that it was really interesting, the kind of work that you have done as a media, through this media program that goes really as far, and also trailing down 4 years down, to try and identify and then get to the root of what really happens to these migrants that remain unaccounted for and therefore missing. So thank you very much for that intervention. And I think we can come back to you with a few questions that I have seen in the chat box. And now I just ask our panelists, our final panelists, Julia Black, who is from IOM, and to just join us. I just asked somebody in the technical room to check. Somebody needs to be admitted, then it's flashing on my screen. Just to introduce Julia Black is based at IOM's Global Migration Data Analysis Center, GMDAC, which is in Berlin, where she coordinates the Missing Migrants Project. And her work deals with data collection and identification of missing migrants worldwide. She has also co-edited IOM's report on migrant deaths and identifications called Fatal Journeys, Volume 3, and has been a co-author on several other publications that are done by IOM. Most particularly, there's one that was just released last week that looked particularly at Africa, the Africa Migration Report, as it is known, looking at irregular migration. So you can look up some of the work that Julia has done in terms of bringing out aspects of her work. And this, and before joining IOM, Julia ran a local nonprofit in San Francisco Bay Area, and she also holds a master in international affairs from the Hertie School of Governance and a Bachelor of Arts in Peace and Conflict Studies from the University of California. And Julia, just to bring you on here, I looked at a tweet that you had just shared that talked about, you know, actually it was from your LinkedIn, where you said every death we record was a person. And if you would allow me to extend it here, I would say it's the person with a family. So I was just wondering, you know, as you come on to give us your deliberations, or rather to give us what your reflections are in terms of the, you know, giving us a scope of what the project is, but going a bit beyond in understanding how, you know, IOM is leading the various actors, not just at the government level, but let's say, you know, also within the UN system, and working together with civil society on how we're tackling this objective Objective 8. You know, how do we really see this sentiment, for instance, that you have expressed in your work through IOM? And I will come back to you with some other questions. So over to you, Julia. Thank you for joining us.
Great. Thanks very much, Patty, for the invitation and the lovely introduction, and to all the other speakers. It's funny, you know, I've been working on this topic now for 5 years, and you think you know everyone, and there's always someone new in one of these discussions. So it's really great. I've actually been a little bit extra and prepared some slides. So I'm just quickly sharing my screen. I hope you can all see. So yes, so just very briefly, and thank you, Patty, as well for this good question about what we're doing. So IOM's Missing Migrants project has been around since 2014. It began collecting the data, which you can see here, basically in response to the Lampedusa shipwrecks in October 2013, which claimed, you know, hundreds of lives. But it is a global database. It's open access, although of course anonymized. And one thing that's relatively recent, and is exactly to the point that you were mentioning, is that we're now trying to understand better what the families of these missing migrants are really doing and what they need. And of course, as Patty mentioned, we write a lot of reports, you know, based on our data and kind of general thematic issues around this issue. So why is IOM doing this? First and foremost, the Missing Migrants project, the data set, is really an advocacy tool. The issues about the invisibility of these people, I think, has been touched on throughout this presentation. Policy, in addition to, of course, Objective 8 that we're here to talk about today, there is also Sustainable Development Goal 10.7. On safe migration, and the Missing Migrants project data set was actually adopted this year as SDG indicator 10.7.3. We also do, on a more ad hoc basis, provide support for operational planning. So that's, you know, of course, going to be providing information on the deaths in specific areas or on specific routes. And unfortunately, also on a very ad hoc basis, we receive requests from family members who haven't been able to find a missing loved one. So we're helping with that in whatever way that we can. So one thing that's really important to mention, and I think it hasn't really been discussed much, is how does one define a missing migrant? So for the Missing Migrants project data set, we're really looking at deaths or sort of presumed deaths, so like disappearances at sea. And the idea there is that this is really identifying the risks of the migratory movements on these irregular migrant routes. That does mean that there are many other sort of missing or deceased migrants who are not included in our data sets. So this is going to be deaths in you know, immigration detention facilities, refugee centers, and so on. There are going to be many deaths linked to labor migration, or, you know, for example, I myself am a labor migrant here in Germany. If I die, I'm not going to be contained in the Missing Migrants project data set. We also simply don't have the capacity to track, you know, internal migrant or internal displacement deaths. And then, you know, much more broadly, we do not include missing persons reports where we don't know if there was, you know, in fact, a death. To my knowledge, there really isn't anyone who has a global picture of how many missing persons reports linked to migration are filed in a given year. As you can imagine, working on any topic linked to irregular migration, data on this is really, really challenging. This is very much linked to this issue of invisibility, where people are intentionally choosing routes to evade detection. This also means that people might be afraid to report a death or a disappearance. It, of course, the remote routes that people take, as Eddie very aptly highlighted, in the desert or overseas, as Philippe was talking about, is going to lead to a vast undercount of migrant deaths. And yeah, absolutely, these deaths in lakes or sea or whatever means that many, many people are just disappearing without a trace. So I hope you guys can see this. It's getting a bit blocked by this Zoom interface, but our methodology, just very briefly, because there really aren't any government actors at a federal level, at least, who are collecting comprehensive data on this topic, we really rely on 5 main sources of data. So this is, the project is and has always been based a lot on news media reporting. We always try to verify this, whether that's from NGOs, other eyewitnesses, other UN agencies, or IOM's offices itself. And ideally, we're able to verify this with a government actor, but this is not always possible. This is then fed into an internal database. We try to verify, we try to reach out to any actor who we think might be relevant. And then it's published. We update the data twice a week, so it's very timely. Just super briefly, I hope you guys can see this. You can see here the data that we have collected, and very obviously, the number of deaths we've recorded in the Mediterranean is dominant, but it is absolutely a global issue. There's really no region of the world where we haven't recorded a death except for, Antarctica. One of the things that's really important to stress when talking about data on migrant deaths, though, is how biased it can be, and especially when you have kind of narratives of a migration crisis, such as you get in the Mediterranean, but also you can see this very clearly in Asia in 2014, 2015. This was when there was a big exodus of Rohingya refugees, many of whom became stranded, very, all over the news off the coast of Southeast Asian countries, and many of these died. These people died, and because this was so high profile, because there was this narrative of a crisis, we have large numbers of deaths recorded. Now, the Rohingya crisis is really not over. In fact, I would say it's as bad, if not worse, as it was then. But these people are now taking, less high profile routes. They're going over land to Bangladesh or overland smuggling routes to Thailand and so on. And so that just makes it much, much harder to really capture the extent of this issue. So yes, as I mentioned, a lot remains unknown, especially in remote areas where there's 1 or 2 people dying. As Filippo mentioned, often the only kind of source of data we have for this is someone who witnessed that, and they might not be willing to talk to us or to talk to the authorities. We do really have, and especially in the last year, a crisis of what we call invisible shipwrecks, where boats are really disappearing without a trace, without any survivors, and it's incredibly, incredibly difficult to, first of all, know that this happened, and second of all, get an estimate of, how many, let alone who was on board. Heavily militarized borders, we get a lot of anecdotal reports about people being killed. You might have seen the Human Rights Watch report about the Ethiopian migrants in Yemen who were killed in April. It's very hard to verify those reports. And then really vitally, for the people most impacted, who are the families and communities left behind by these migrants, we have so few details about who these people are who die. So in order to kind of in some way address this, this year we're piloting a research project, basically trying to find families who are searching for missing migrants who have disappeared, somewhere in the central and western Mediterranean routes. One of the things that we're trying to do with this project is to counter the narrative that these families are all going to be in, like underdeveloped countries, very poor and destitute. In fact, the research we've done, which is being carried out in Ghana, Ethiopia, Spain, and UK, all of which are, some variety of countries of origin, transit, and destination. There are families in all of these countries who have lost someone. And the results from this will all be released later this year and up to March next year. But this is a little bit of a sneak preview. The idea, is of course to raise awareness about the families impacted. Somehow this often is really absent from discussions about this, especially, with policymakers, and to really listen to these families and understand what they need, and then take what they're telling us and, give this to the policymakers to say, you do need to take action in this way. Unfortunately, the key findings, I have to say, have been really, really heartbreaking across all countries, really. The families are overwhelmingly the ones who are pushing this by any and all means available. And this is despite the fact that many of them are themselves in really precarious situations. Some of the research we did in Spain was in, the farms in southern Spain, where many of these people are kind of irregular migrant workers, farm workers. Across the board, really, there are no centralized government actors who are really working on this issue. I think the Italian Special Commissioner would be like the exclusive exception to this that I'm aware of. And then one thing, just super briefly, which was really, really difficult for me as a woman, is to hear how badly impacted the women, especially wives of migrants who have gone missing, have been, really cast out, not by the governments, or not just by the governments, but also very often by their communities that they're living in. So what are we trying to do? On the data side, we're doing some very cool high-tech stuff using an assisted machine learning tool and natural language processing to capture more media results on this topic. We now have a system of regional monitors who are kind of mapping out relevant actors and trying to, collect data, especially from smaller NGOs that we might not be aware of. Yes, we are planning to put out these recommendations and really have a strong communications campaign with this, because I think very often, recommendations from big UN or other big organizations are put out and just kind of into the vast abyss of, all of the reports that are published. And of course, I think everyone, who's presented here faces the challenge of fundraising. Our fundraising actually expires at the end of the year, so we're constantly kind of fighting for funds to continue the project, but also we really hope to expand and improve. So that's that from me. Yes, so thanks very much. And again, I know many of you presenting, and I've also seen quite a lot of you in the participants list who I've met, at least virtually. But like I said, we're always looking for more contacts working on this issue. So please, my email was in the slide and I can put it in the chat. Please reach out to me if you're doing relevant work. Thank you.
Julia, thank you for that presentation on the IOM project. And I'm just made to think that, as you are, you're saying you'll be going out to do a piece, I guess, on recommendations that would go to governments. And we've also heard that ICRC has had these recommendations that have been sitting out there since June 2020. And I guess, other actors in the stage as well. How do all these things really come together? And I sort of liked what you said about, really families are the ones that are sitting. And I'm meant to think that, in some cases, it's also families that have been left behind, mainly women and children who've been left behind by most of these migrants that have gone out to seek work, in the case of where men are the ones that have been the breadwinners. So they're the ones trying to get a bit more information, to get a bit more clarity. Why aren't governments doing a little bit more? Because these are their citizens who remain unaccounted for, who would be interesting as remittance senders in this case. So why are we not really seeing this level of engagement? And what would you say then is really the stumbling block in terms of international cooperation? So from IOM's side, together with other actors in the room, but then together collectively in pushing governments to say, this you signed up to in the GCM, and it's not just a placeholder because we needed to say something about missing migrants, but we went a step further and said that we actually want to deal with what's happening with their families. So do you just want to come in, and then I will ask Filippo as well to just answer on the same question, sort of giving this question back to Filippo and saying, why are we not working together in this space? If we, we can be on the same webinars, why are we not working together? Or where are we working together?
Absolutely. No, I think this issue of getting states to buy into, taking some steps to improve this is really the heart of it, right? There shouldn't need to be any NGOs doing search and rescue anywhere in the world, because that's actually a state's obligation. In my view, of course, countries of destination are going to be resistant to anything that's going to promote more migration. That's just the reality of the world. What we have found with this families research, for example, is that other kinds of countries are just not really aware that this is a problem. So we actually had a great consultation with some stakeholders from the Ethiopian government a few weeks ago. They're extremely keen to really build up the capacity within their agencies to work on this issue, but it's a question of capacity. It's a question of prioritization. How many other issues do these countries face, and is this the most pressing one? And ultimately, it's really like it or not, many of these countries are receiving a lot of funds from governments which are not into this idea. And I think one thing I have noticed actually when looking, I just wrote a page about GCM Objective 8. It's one of the few objectives actually where human rights is not mentioned explicitly. And I do wonder, to what degree is that a reflection of states' lack of acknowledgement that this is a human rights issue?
Filippo, do you want to come in on onto that one?
No, but I mean, it's interesting from listen to the Rafik speak before. So we have different situation. We have information that we try to help families. Survivors are witness, and they have information, but they are not in trust to share information with authorities. And this is a very big point for me. So build the trust because they are, let's say, irregular, they are migrants. So how can we create something to protect this person and keep the information from this person to help families and not to put in danger this witness? This is a very important point. On the other side, we know that we as a civil society and international organization have information when they, because of the direct implication of family and so on, the information cross to the formal and visible way. But we know that there is a kind of informal lines and informal channel of information. Sometimes the family know, and that's it, and they don't want to share the fact that they know with the organization. This is important to know and to understand why. What we try to do and try to help families is try to give to the families the right to search and right to know, and decide if they don't want to do it. It's okay, but they must have the tools to do it. On the other side, we know that there is people who disappear, and they want to just disappear. So you cannot force this research on the other side. And we discuss in Lesbos with the Last Right project about the fact that sometimes the person are leaving the family, escaping from families. So we need to be clear about the position of families. So it's very complicated situation, but I think what is most important is the idea to building trust, or to create, it's why I was talking about the firewall. There is an interesting paper from Crépeau, François Crépeau was the special reporter for migration last 5 years, few years ago, and he was talking about a firewall system to protect irregular migrants. And I think we need to think something like this, and that's why I'm putting in the conversation ICRC, because we need someone between who can do this, can have this role of keep information but protect persons. This is very important for me.
And interesting, Filippo, because it seems the ICRC was, the program is meant to have been, creating some kind of the best standards, right, around this. And IOM is also working around the same spaces. And of course, the definition of missing migrants remains something that's sort of sitting there, and it depends on the framework of each and every one of our programs. So I'm hoping that maybe in your final remarks, we can talk a little bit about how we can actually do something about international cooperation. I mean, like we said, these sessions are also meant to be a bit thought-provoking and saying, actually, what practical things can we do to move to the next steps? Julia was just telling us about them sitting and drafting out recommendations, and we know what that means. And sometimes we have the tendency to just say, this feeds into this one, like we have said, GCM will feed into Agenda 2030, and and everyone can try and see how it fits in, but it's sort of being a bit more intentional on the ground in terms of practical actions of how we can see actors really working together and structures meeting in that sense. So I hope to hear both from you and Julia how you sort of see this working. It may not be cast in stone in your organizations, but just a bit of reflections from your side on how we can turn this one just a little bit more. And in speaking about this, I thought I would just get back to Elisa, and before I will open the floor for some of our eminent speakers. Elisa, for just 2 minutes, I think I had given you a reflection here on sort of looking at, saving lives beyond humanitarian assistance. I think you took us through this presentation and talking about how, for instance, what are the stumbling blocks that you see in terms of identification from your region? And here we're talking, identification we know can be a government-led thing and can be a family-led thing. But what's stopping from these two efforts working together in these regions where you explain? So Elisa, maybe you can just give us a few reflections on that, and I will ask some of the prominent speakers in the room to prepare themselves. I think I will list out some names in a bit.
Yes, Paddy, regarding to your question, I think that there is a reserve, at least in my region, from governments to allow family members to search for their missing relatives, because this action shows governments' incapacity to conduct adequate investigations related to missing persons. And also in some cases, it shows the collision of state agents or even governments with organized crime. In Mexico, unfortunately, we have many examples that shows this. In the 72 migrants case in 2010, there have been some advances in the investigation in 10 years, because this happens 10 years ago. But this was in great part, the advances are in great part thanks to the action of family members who have searched for their families, and also for the action of NGOs. In Mexico, we have a very serious problem regarding enforced disappearance, which affects national and, of course, migrant persons. The topic of missing persons became part of the official discourse as a result of the pressure that society exerted on the government after events such as Ayotzinapa, but the 72 migrants case was in 2010, 4 years before Ayotzinapa. So for some years, we have discovered mass graves all over Mexico with hundreds of bodies inside them. So migrants who transit Mexico do not escape from this problem. Actually, its irregular migrant condition worsens the possibilities to be found alive or just to be found by their relatives. So interstate action is needed, is urgently needed. So that's what I would say.
Indeed, again, the push from families, and actually the role of interstate interventions in this cause. I mean, if we are really to move this agenda forward as ambitious as we had placed it out in the Global Compact for Migration. I'm just going to ask William Goss, who is from the Migrants Forum in Asia, if William, if you could just share with us your reflection. What are your thoughts really? You know, are families the ones that should really be holding this? You know, and at the end of the day, what's happening really around the space of international cooperation in your opinion and your experience, William? I think we need William to unmute. Is William here? We just need William to unmute. Please post your questions, participants in the room. We had a bit of a technical issue. Somebody got a little bit excited in our chat room and forgot the meeting that we're in and posted a few, I would say, rather irrelevant material. But so please kindly ignore that. We're trying to clean up that. But we do have some questions in the room, and that's why you have seen us sort of, you know, trying to admit people as we're going along. Usually we have been very good to clean this up from the very beginning. But is William there to just give us his, okay, William?
Not able to see William, but.
Okay, Rula Hamati. Rula Hamati, are you with us? Just to give us some reflections.
Rula also, I think she's not there. So we'll give some question chat box, will work out.
Unmute. Okay, we have a question for Eduardo, and this one comes from Eno Essien. And Eno is saying most governments of developing countries have not domesticated the Global Compact for Migration, and IOM and other organizations are handling migration issues have a lot to do with promoting regular and safe migration. I wondered, Eduardo, if you wanted to say something about this, and maybe here I would also ask others in the room, particularly maybe Julia, to ask what you think is, you know, and just to paraphrase this question maybe, is to sort of say, what do you think then is the responsibility of those countries that would not have signed? So Eduardo, if you could respond to that, and then Julia, if you could just add on, please. Or Julia, you can go ahead and start while we wait for Eduardo to sort his technical issues.
Sure. Yeah. I think it's a really interesting question because I know, at least from our project, and I know this is so basically the Swiss government, which has not signed the Global Compact, is actually one of our main donors and is actually also a major donor for the ICRC's work on missing migrants as well. So I think in some ways the GCM is good. It's a step forward. It's raising awareness around this issue, but it's not everything that's happening on this issue. So that's something that's very important to keep in mind. I think you know, there are many countries which haven't signed the GCM, which have acknowledged this as an issue regardless. It's also important to keep in mind, you know, and this is very much speaking from my experience, that this is very often an issue which is handled at a more local level. So, you know, while the US government doesn't collect statistics on migrant deaths, there are many, you know, local level coroners like the Webb County coroner that Eduardo mentioned that do. So the Global Compact is obviously very high level. It can absolutely lead to norm change, you know, in the long run. But in the short run, it might be more effective to target more local, you know, government actors that can really make a difference, because generally these kind of big initiatives at an international or even a national level are really slow as well. And this is a problem which needs to be addressed like yesterday, really.
No, valid point there, Julia. I think, I don't know if Eduardo
yes,
is here in the room. Eduardo, please go ahead.
Okay. Well, one particular point through the Forensic Border Coalition for over the last 6-7 years in Honduras and in El Salvador, there is family reference sample banks that have been organized by the Argentine Forensic Anthropology team. And for the last, as a Forensic Border Coalition for the last 6-7 years, we have not been able to cross-reference those family reference samples with what is in the United States CODIS, where they store recovered bodies and the DNA. So it took a hearing with the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights of the OAS for us to kind of push that along, and now we're doing a pilot project to where there will be some family reference samples cross-referenced with what is in the CODIS database here in Texas. So that's one example of the resistance in terms of international cooperation and cross-referencing in terms of identification. The process for families takes a long time. For instance, if somebody is recovered in the brush out here in South Texas, and that that person has an identification on them, but the body is not recognizable due to a lot of different elements in the environment. That process for families to submit a family reference sample, and that family reference sample be compared to what the recovered body, it takes almost a year. And the family is pretty much assuming that that person is their loved one, but it takes them a year for that genetic profile to be generated by the banks here. And so it's a very, very very heartbroken process for families to undertake that. The GCM, the Global Compact on Migration, the United States, of course, did not participate and has removed itself from even from the Human Rights Council. So maybe, and I say a big maybe, hopefully that there is a change in the politics and November here in a couple of weeks, and that process can be reinitiated with a different administration in terms of having some type of input in terms of the Global Compact on Migration, especially and the U.S.-Mexico border right now, because of how the crisis is so overwhelming right now.
Thank you, Eduardo. I just wanted to turn to Rula Hamati from the Cross-Regional Center for Refugees and Migrants in Lebanon. And maybe Rula, from you to just hear a bit about on this topic in relation to domestic workers in Lebanon. What is the situation and what would you sort of say in terms of international coordination around this subject on GCM Objective 8?
Thank you. Thanks, Paddy. But just to say, I'm speaking on a personal note and not on behalf of the Cross-Region Center. But in any case, I just wanted to add to the discussion, because I think that the issue of domestic workers is it's a very important issue that sometimes we forget about in the context of talking about missing migrants. Although, especially in the Arab region, for instance, there are thousands and thousands of domestic workers who come to countries of destination. They are not in communication with their families, so families back home do not know what's happened to their family members because of practices like confiscation of passports, confiscation of mobile phones, cut in communications, and the families back home really have no idea what's happened to them. In very terrible situations, also we find that domestic workers who are abused and in many cases are killed, nobody is there to identify the remains, and nobody is there to kind of return the remains to the families who have lost their loved ones. And I think it's not just a question of efforts and kind of assisting in, finding missing migrants, but also what are some of the measures that we can all take to make sure that people don't end up in situations like this? What kind of protections can we put in place to ensure that, everybody's accounted for, everyone? And we are talking about people who come in countries regularly, who come in for work, who come in, on contracts and all of this. And at the end of the day, they just end up as numbers. And I think it's our, kind of a humanitarian duty to do something about this, to protect people and to make sure that, especially in the context of domestic work, they're not just, disappearing behind closed doors. Thank you.
Thank you, Rula. I'm just wondering if William is here with us from Migrants Foundation in Asia, Forum in Asia. And just to give us William, I don't know if you managed to come in. I think your connection is a bit weak on the other side. But then as William is preparing, if he is with us in the room, I just wanted to then go to come back again to Rafiq. And Rafiq, here I thought that, maybe we could hear a little bit more in terms of how you are working, as a media institution with this program, in terms of sort of also changing and, changing that whole narrative around migration. I mean, I know in this particular instance with this objective, we're talking about missing migrants and the kind of work that you have done. But have you seen sort of from similar initiatives, whether they're within your borders or outside, and also even from the sending country, from the receiving countries, if how receptive your program has been in terms of drawing support from other media houses, and I'm also thinking here of some of the local government support that you may have received in terms of driving this initiative forward. I mean, like you mentioned, even though some numbers, I'm quite astonished to see places that are as well connected, with technology and everything that there is in places that Singapore and Malaysia, and you still cannot find 80, 20, 120 people cannot be located in terms of their families. But of course, these are just numbers, and I guess the numbers even remain more even for migrants that are from other places in Southeast Asia. So I just wanted to find out from you what kind of reception you have received also from other media houses, but also the support that you're getting from local government. Rafiq?
Yes. Paddy, really very bad experience from my side, because last 20 years I am doing this program and I haven't received any good notion or support from the destination countries. And at least from government of India, they recently started, means 5 years before, they started a online grievance method called Madad. When it started, we started to file the cases of missing into that online portal with the family's version and the documents that we have. But at least what this country can do is, at least they can approach the destination country and start an enquiry for the missing person. But in all cases, most of the cases, the employer's version, the employer in the sense, the sponsor's version will be the answer, the final answer. Employer said the person is absconded from this year. There is no news about him after that. The person is absconded. We have filed around 500 plus cases with the mother, and the highest number of responses is like with there is no answer. The response is employer's version is the person is absconded. So we know that a person is, if he is having a document with his passport number or any other document, his PR number, labor card number, it is very easy to track down this person. But in most cases, this is not happening. Just before the lockdown, during the lockdown, there is no program. The TV program is actually stuck because of the lockdown. The last episode I done was 983rd episode, means 983rd week of my program after August 2020. This 983 week episodes I covered. Sometimes I am covering 2 missing cases. Sometimes I am covering 3 missing cases. In all cases, we have covered around 2000 plus missing cases, and we found around 1000 plus only. The remaining is still in unidentified, not got any answer. This is the pathetic situation. And Elisa said, and the IOM person also said about the people back home. People are the big concern for me. The first episode, I took a case of a person, that family is still with us. Every week they are calling, every month they are calling, every year they have issues of their children. And the well-beings of these families are big concern for us. And the missing person is still missing. No identification, no track. That's all.
Thank you for that, and I think you managed to sum up your insights. I would just ask each of the panelists now to just give us 1 minute of sort of what your highlight is. I think I gave a bit of homework to two who are on. Please feel obliged or not, but please do feel obliged for the sake of our audience and for our conversation to remain solid and meaty. As it has been. So maybe just starting back from the top, Dr. Elisa, any so your 1-2 takeaway or sort of key highlights that you want to give us, and then followed by Eduardo, Philippe Fury, and then Rafik, you can take a minute, and then Julia, you can close us there. Dr. Elisa, is Dr. Elisa still with us in the room? Okay, let's move on to Eduardo. Eduardo, are you with us? Okay, Dr. Elisa is in the room.
Hello, I'm sorry, I had some troubles with my internet and I am in my mobile. So I would only say that we cannot close the eyes for what this situation is happening in all of our regions, and that we should make compromises for
I think we lost Dr. Elisa. Eduardo, are you here? You could just start and then she can continue with us when she's back.
Yes, are there closing remarks in this regard or what? And are we addressing?
I would say your one big thing that we need to kick this one off.
Well, I think that we're looking at more international cooperation between Mexico and the Central American countries and the U.S. in terms of the future, in terms of the process of really trying to regularize, and then at the same time trying to make efforts for identification and the missing, in terms of more cooperation and more. The NGOs, I think, are making a very, very valiant effort in terms of cooperating and networking. I think that has efforts with the ICRC has been very, very fruitful, and other organizations, and we'll continue to do those efforts.
Thank you. Rafik or Filippo? Do we have you, Filippo?
I can. Or Rafik, do you want to go?
No, Filippo, you done?
No, it's very easy for me to say that we must share our experience and keep in touch, try to share our experience for inside, let's say, and outside, try to work to let's say, building trust in one hand, and the other try to work to protect migrants and try to protect migrants in order to have a safe journey and can move. And we defend the idea of freedom of movement. So this is the one of the political topics. And concerning the others, let's say the witnesses, survivors, and protect them to help families. This is my point. Thanks. Thank you to everybody.
Thank you, Filippo. Rafik?
Yeah. I would like to say something with my experience. I'm suggesting a few recommendations. One is the countries of destination original country should share the data, and there should be some research on how these the countries how they are making better policies for migration, are growing better than any other countries. And data sharing should be there. And the third thing is better policies. Better policies will definitely remove this situation. In my experience, Middle East, if they are bringing more better policies like kafala, Qatar recently, August 2020, they introduced the new kafala policy. Like there is no exit visa, there is no exit permit require them for going out of the country. There is no NOC from the employer. So such good practices can be copied by the other governments, and good policies can be remove this pathetic situation of missing from my version. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rafiq. Julia?
Thanks, and thanks for giving me the last word as well. I mean, I think all of this has been fascinating. I know I have learned some new things. So I really think my takeaway is to always stay curious and always to stay in contact on this issue, because it is something which inherently is always going to need a lot of coordination across countries, between actors. And ultimately, I think it is, the burden lies on the states to provide safe alternatives to irregular migration. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to all our panelists. I think we have had a very enriching discussion that one cannot even wrap up in a sentence. But I think that, some important things have been mentioned here. And I like what Elisa had said, that she wasn't able to join us in the end, but pointing out to this statement that we have heard over and over again, that human rights do not end with death. And sort of what that means in terms of the responsibility for those who are left behind, whether we're related to these people or not. And those who are working in government, those civil society organizations as well that are working to find a way to really collaborate our efforts together in us, mitigating this, because, we cannot put a lid on it unless we're working together, because as you can see, various angles have been covered and we can't even agree on what a definition is. But, sometimes we would say we don't want to get lost into the definitions. We want to get lost into making sure people are accounted for and people, whether they're, when they're alive, that they're accounted for, and that we can save lives, and that when they're no longer with us, that we can, pay our due respects, account for who they are, but also support their families. So I think this has been really important. Julia, you had mentioned something in the very beginning, sort of saying, what about the human rights aspect of it? And it made me scratch up a bit and look at the Special Rapporteur's open letter. I think that was from 2018, just before the GCM was signed, and where the Special Rapporteur, including other rapporteurs, I think on human rights for migrants, among others, was sort of, commenting on this particular one. And it sort of really, first of all, referred back to the Mytilene Declaration for Dignified Treatment of all missing persons and deceased persons and their families resulting from migrant journeys. But it also was calling for a more forceful wording, already saying at that time when it was a draft, saying the wording is not strong enough. But it was also saying it doesn't really cover everything. What about the families? And, how about collaborative efforts? And also pointing a lot to customary international law, which is what brings us together. Because if we have to leave it to individual governments, as we have heard, nothing gets to be done. So, we need the likes of the international civil society networks, the international organizations such as IOM and other international organizations, ICRC and others, the media as well. It's really something is about a collaborative effort. If we are really to save lives beyond, just providing basic human needs and providing humanitarian provision, if you like. So I think with that, I would say we have come to the end of our webinar. It's been very educative. And thank you again to all the panelists who have joined us and, sat with us throughout these 2 hours and just shared with us your insights. So thank you. You can kindly unmute your mics and say goodbye or hello, and we give it 1 minute and then we will close from here. Again, thank you very much and take care. Be safe.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you all.
Thank
Bye.
you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all. Ciao. Take care. Ciao.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you, Filippo. Thank you, Eduardo.
Ciao. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Ciao.